I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice. Tumbling down the rabbit hole?
You could say that.
I can see it in your eyes. You have the look of a man who accepts what he sees because he is expecting to wake up.
Okay, does this sound better?
It sounds perfectly fine now.
We
I
did
don't
it.
hear any chop. We've done it.
Okay.
We done did it. All right.
Okay.
So thanks everyone for being patient. I know shit happens. It's always fun to have a C-section live, I guess. But so tell us. We were kind of talking about comedians. I was mentioning, Bill Burr and not Philip K. Dick, Louis C.K. and Joe Rogan.
Two very different men.
Quite, yeah, right on the scale of socially acceptable at this point.
And thanks
Michael
for switching
Fitzsimmons.
rooms. Now you're perfectly synced, Tony.
Yeah, you're doing good.
Right now.
So I will shut the fuck up. You can kind of pick back up where you were. If you even want to recap what you said originally, you don't have to, clearly, because it was choppy and redacted. But basically, you grew up in Boston. You were in Harvard. You were on campus essentially growing up, which I found not ironic, but like synchronistic, I guess is a better term. Given you're a Capricorn and want to be a part of achievement and high status and stuff, not in a bad way, but it's like that's the creme de la creme of Ivy League, whatever's.
Then let me just interrupt, because what I think the real creme de la creme is someone who managed to get there, and get out and not get completely brainwashed and actually become a relevant comedian or have relevant topics to discuss, which I think is the real graduation. I'm not sure how you see this, and I don't know, maybe you have a doctorate or something, but maybe just as an aside, tell me a little bit about whatever academic endeavors or how you see university. And then the second question, because the one video of you I saw is where you do all these stretchings, and what always comes to my mind here is the synchronicity or holographic resonance connection, if you want to use fancy words, between the ability to be flexible in mind and to be flexible in body. Because I often also find this can easily be related, and I'd love to know your opinion.
You got to watch her Gyration Nation videos, bro. They're gold, Jerry. They're gold.
Well, I think it's interesting to think about mental flexibility and physical flexibility, and also when you are part of institutional thinking, how much you are distracted from your own imagination, and you are almost encouraged to take on your ability to use other people's thoughts to justify your own thoughts. And so when I look at institutional learning and how you are meant to write an essay in the beginning, you are told, okay, I'm going to go read other people's work. And through my reading of other people's work, I'm going to regurgitate their thoughts. And maybe through this regurgitation process, I might come up with some idea that is my own, but it's my own through this very specific lens of information that I just received. So I think one of the things that's interesting about academia as a confine is that it's really contingent upon you conforming to ideas that have already been accepted by society. And I do think
Cue
there's
Pink Floyd The
something
Wall, right? It's just like fit in the
right.
mold or else no go.
And in order to deconstruct something, you have to understand what has been constructed and how it's been constructed. So it's not as if education is meaningless, because then you're in a postmodern nightmare where you don't understand how everything is and you're not necessarily aware of the context of which you came from. But how do you break free from wanting to be accepted from this societal uh, expectation of what it is to be educated or intelligent or smart? I think that's where things start to get convoluted, because your identity gets really wrapped up in having people agree with you versus exploring ideas. And I think that's one of the things that's really difficult about modern conversation is that there isn't a lot of space for exploration because people are always attacking and judging versus questioning and examining.
1000% said perfectly well. Everybody says they can hear you perfectly, by the way. So we're ace and we're good to go.
We did it.
We did it. Tinkerbell's wings. Clap. Clap, Peter. Clap. My wings weren't right, like the Hook illusion. Sorry. I don't know if you've ever seen Spielberg's Hook. I would imagine so, given we're in the same age bracket, basically. If you haven't, that's okay. Good movie. So he had a question about body stuff, and I want to get into the body stuff for sure.
Oh, yeah, right.
Trust me, I was like, hey, Raphael, you're just loading up the cues here up on the front end. All good. We can get to that kind of idea later, but if you want to tackle it now, you totally can. And then we'll just kind of keep
Right,
trucking through.
the physical, the flexible mind and flexible body. Well, obviously, from a philosophical standpoint, people are always looking at the mind body duality and what is the conversation and relationship between the two. And I think one of the things about having an open mind that can be dangerous is that you are open minded. Right. And when you have an open mind, there is all sorts of ways in which you can think and you can be influenced. I mean, I have a very open mind. And so if someone wants to convince me that the earth is flat, I'm open to it. I'm not necessarily sold on everything that I'm
You're
told,
totally team rabbit hole. You're playing
I'm
with the
open
ideas.
to it.
Yeah.
I like to play with the ideas of what is reality. And I think the body is basically the most wise part of the human experience because the body isn't limited to the programming and to the confines of language. So whenever we're speaking in language, there is that sense of how we have been told to speak that's always filtering how we communicate when we're using our brains and our minds. Like my brain has been like my brain believes the story that it's been told ultimately because that story that my brain has been told is how I've come to form reality. So when I have conversations with people or when I'm trying to pick apart complex ideas with my mind, I'm always going to be entwined with the thoughts that have come with the programming of my human experience. But when we look to the body, the wisdom of the body, I do believe we're tapping into something that is beyond language, that has to do with the ethereal, the mystical, you know, how we communicate from a telepathic perspective. So, gesture, for instance, can have all sorts of meaning to people. And I think the thing that's interesting about the openness of body movement is that everyone accepts that it can mean a multitude of different things. You're not you're not put into the box when you're moving the body because there is this understanding that, oh, this can mean one thing to another person and it can mean another person to another. But when we use our words and our mouths, we're really kind of like holding ourselves prisoner and hostage to ideas that we speak versus ideas that we feel or express through artistic measures, if that makes sense.
Very succinct, and I totally concur. It's weird. I mean, Terrence McKenna's like culture's not your friend, right? And yet, ironically, it is what it is. Like it's the petri dish through which we develop. I mean, it's the it is you can't not you can't have a iPhone or a computer or whatever without software. It's just how it works. Being aware that you're kind of open source and programmable goes a long way. Actually, in your second Gyration Nation video, that I mean, I watched all three this morning because I woke up at 3 fucking a.m. because full moons, I guess. Um, I watched them and I was like, this is your comedy's good and your videos are good. And I felt like this was seriously important stuff, like to the degree where I was like, I hope you keep doing the Gyration Nation kind of tutorials or classroom or whatever you call it, because it's it's so succinct and on point. I mean, it's funny because you're playing with big ideas and you're pushing limits, but you're not so to reference Terrence McKenna again. It's like you're not so open minded that you have the wind blowing through.
Yeah.
You're actually critical enough where it's like you're grounding and you're being realistic. I mean, you're willing to play with like, oh my god, maybe we're simulations or there's no free will. That's a big idea. But oh hey doggy. But at the same time, their internet debut. But at the same time, you're grounded. I mean, the Capricorn really comes through in Aquarius, Venus. You do love. I mean, that's co-ruled Aquarius by Uranus and Saturn, so it's structure related too, even though it's kind of fringe structure. I digress. So, we will tackle. I mean, I want to get into like what your performative kind of reality is. All the heady stuff about your output. But I want to make sure I cover enough bases of your past that people kind of know who the fuck you are. And it's always fun to just be like, why is this Pokemon? Why is Charizard? Where did he come from? What's going on? So, you graduated, I think, from Sarah Lawrence with a philosophy degree. So you didn't go to Harvard, which is fine. I don't care. Tell us a little about where you've been questioning things and like what was the impetus towards that? Was it kind of a fallback, or are you a thinker and that's just how it went? Define your terms, kind of thing. I mean, philosophy is a heady thing. I started there and I ended up dropping out because it's just like you said, you get kind of prison food. I haven't been to prison, but it's like all you can eat buffet or whatever platters of thought, and it's like, look, um, here's Hegel or here's Nietzsche or whatever, and they're gonna try to kind of. It's good to know where we've come from etymologically, kind of in terms of thought history. But then you just start playing favorites, and you can get into whole little niches of life. I mean, I'm sure most Gothic people have had a Nietzsche phase or whatever, right? Something like that. So, um, tell us a little about college and maybe some of those formative moments and how you dealt with all that jazz.
Yeah, it's funny you keep asking me and then I keep like turning to these abstract ideas. I
Not a
think because
problem.
I'm sick of myself. You ever get sick of yourself and you get sick of your own stupid story and you're like, "Ah, who fucking cares about myself?"
I
But
do.
I think the reason for me around a lot of why I am the way I am is because of growing up in this academic environment, but also having a disdain for it, an equal disdain. And almost seeing, when I think you have parents that are successful, but you see them as humans who have flaws, then you begin to question everything about the structure that is respecting them so much. So, of course, my parents are delightful human beings and they're both in academics and they're professors and they were very interested in news and in culture and in society, etc. But because I was a child, a black sheep in that environment, I questioned everything. And institutional education was like high on my list of that. So after I went to high school, I did a program called City Year, which is it's like an
I did
AmeriCorps.
City or Philly. I did
Oh
it.
my god!
Yeah,
Oh
gang
my
gang. See,
god!
I told you were
Yes.
Team Rabbit Hole. I told you. I mean, I did mine like
Hmm.
2007 or whatever, but my God, Philadelphia. Don't do it in Germantown. Shout out Germantown. But yeah, I know what you're talking about. The red jackets and the calisthenics and all that.
Oh, yeah, 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 the slap happy. So I did this program, and in that program, you really do devote your life for that year to service. And you work with kids. At least when I did it, I was working with kids. And there's something about that concept that is so humbling to be of service and to be of service to children and children that are not yours, that you're never going to see again. And so for me, that really woke me up to this concept of privilege. I do not think that at that time, not obviously privilege has always existed, but in terms of like the cultural zeitgeist, people weren't talking about white privilege in the same way. They weren't talking about class privilege in the same way. They weren't talking about academic privilege or emotional privilege. Like these were things that just culturally weren't as popular to discuss. So for me, I kind of had a renaissance of the soul when doing City Year because I was really slapped in the face of my level of privilege. And with that comes this like humbling and this desire to honor the privilege that I'm given and to not take it for granted. And I also felt like culturally there was this really odd phenomenon of equating college with parties. And so there was all these movies like American
American
Pie
Pie
and
came out when I was in Boston. We were talking about that when you were
yes,
gone. It's like,
all of
yep.
that cultural stuff where it was like, college is for parties and you're supposed to be social and party and you're supposed to fuck guys in fraternities. And I was like, ugh, no, like college is a privilege. Like this is the only chance in life where you're really gonna be able to explore your academic mind within this, container where people are trying to develop your intelligence. Like, what are you fucking talking about? Also, I partied plenty in high school. I think I was a little partied out.
I can
So,
imagine.
Yeah,
what would we expect from the Here We Are Now entertain us generation at a level? I mean, it's a postmodern kind of dark side where it's just like, yeah, what's novel? I want to, and partying, especially at that age developmentally, like psychologically, physiologically, it's a very explorative time. So not everyone's like on a career path. They're more like how fucked up can I get? Who am I hooking up with? I didn't really roll like that. But anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off. Just so people know, AmeriCorps is, or City or rather is this AmeriCorps thing, which is kind of like a domestic Peace Corps. So you're going into, I mean, you have teams or whatever, and you're going into, I don't know about your situation, but like middle and elementary school, I was with elementary school kids, running after school programs, doing in class assistance, and usually in like more underprivileged, harder, ghetto, dare I say, areas. At least in Philadelphia, like I'd bump into a gun on the bus, and I was just like, "This is real." Like, okay, so people are like, "What are they even talking about?" It's a very hands on, um, frontline civic duty, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed idealism kind of thing, and it's tricky because it doesn't pay well and it's hard. I mean, you probably have horror stories. It's like, because I was a mid-year, I only did a few months. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is a burnout real quick. I mean, it's heavy. You start seeing the systemic failure, and even beyond just the system, it's like family structures aren't being met the same way I'm used to. So it's like a lot of these kids don't know their parents, or are kind of left to their own devices, et cetera, et cetera. I am totally hogging the mic, sorry. So keep going with what your thoughts were.
No, and I think exactly what was speaking to you was speaking to me as well. And this deep responsibility to be a force of consistency for children who didn't have that at home, and really feeling the injustice of that. And I think the thing that's interesting about City, or that experience, is you mentioned this word idealism. And I think it's really difficult to negotiate and manage idealism when you're doing on the ground activist work, because it is really difficult and it is really disheartening, and you do see a lot of the underbelly of how much the system is designed to keep things the way that they are, and you almost feel like a rabbit, or like whatever.
Futility
Yeah,
and
you
the
feel
gerbil
the
wheel. Yeah.
you feel the gerbil in the wheel, and you feel very futile. And yet, when you look at it from just a purely individualist perspective, my life was changed. The kids that I was there for that year, like, their life was impacted by my presence. And so from that microcosm, you can have hope. But from the macrocosm, your hope is really challenged. And so to maintain that sense of idealism, I think, is the key to doing any sort of work where you're devoting yourself to fighting against the status quo. Or maybe that's even not even the language we want to use. Imagining fighting against is actually giving it power. Like, what do I want to say? That I'm working towards
Like
something different.
renovating, I
Yeah,
guess.
I'm working towards something different. I'm renovating. I don't know,
Hoping.
pontificating,
Because
hoping.
it's usually, it's like, I think it's like 18 to 25-year-olds. It's a very young thing, and it tended to be, I don't know. It's like instead of going abroad, it was a whole slew of people doing it, but it seemed more like gap year kids who are like, instead of going right to Harvard or whatever, I'm going to go figure out how the world works. And it was very realistic. There's actually a documentary we were told to watch, and I don't know if you've ever seen it, called Boys of Baraka. It's about Baltimore inner city
Hmm.
youth going over to Africa and kind of getting in
Yeah.
touch with their roots and stuff. Really heavy shit. When we watched that, I was like crying. I was like, "What the fuck? This is we're here in the middle of this." But it was surreal to me because I mean I had more hair back then. I had these young African American kids touching my hair and asking me if I had slaves and shit. And I was just like, what? Like, it wasn't a joke. Like, they just did not really hang out with white people, and it was like I was the albino gorilla in the jungle or whatever. So it was just like, alien card, right? So heady stuff. We don't have to tread on it forever, but it's if people are interested in that, always donate to it. If you've ever got some loose change and you just don't know what to do, there's plenty of movements that are designed to try to rectify a situation that does seem futile, but it's like we the people in America, at least the theory is, we're here doing it. It's us. These systems are made of people. We can adapt it and change it. It might not happen overnight, but Boston itself is a very revolutionary town. Things happen. Sons of Liberty, right? So we just have to be aware of that power. But it can feel very futile. When I left there, I was burnt out and I was just depressed. I think I got into alcoholism right after that. I was just like, Jesus Christ, what the hell? Like, America's not what I thought. Anyway, talk about anything you'd like on. I mean, we can keep going or hover here or whatever's clever.
Well, yeah, America's not what I thought. That exactly. And I think that that's a really heartbreaking realization when you start to recognize that, oh, what is my responsibility for my government? Like on the one hand, I'm like, well, it's nothing to fucking do with me. I'm not fracking. I'm not doing that shit. But on the other hand, I am the benefactor of all the atrocities that my government is doing on a daily basis. And that is a really hard, painful thing to reconcile. So even if I don't agree with it, I'm still benefiting. I do not agree with the military industrial complex. I do not agree with the way that like our tax system has been allocating funds. I do not agree with any of that. But here I am, doop dee doo, like
We don't want to go
doing
live in
my
mud daub
thing.
huts about it. It's a weird thing between practicality and idealism. I mean, that's a weird edge to float on because you're trying to change the culture from within, but then you have to submit to it to the degree to work with it. Like I use money. I mean, we can use crypto, but even that's pretty volatile. So it's a tricky time. Anyway, I'll shut up. So you did sit here. You were a full year. I was a mid year. That's pretty heavy shit. After that, like you were going to college, I guess.
Yeah, so after that, I went to a school called Sarah Lawrence, which is a very kind of it's a more alternative school, and I actually grew up at a very, very, very basic school in a certain sense that, like, had, like, sports as a priority, sports and academics, and you do this, and you go to business school, and it wasn't necessarily a creative space, nor did I think of myself as a creative person because I was fitting into a different culture at the time and always feeling slightly alien within it, but also dealing with, like, the social pressures of being, you know, in a school. Yeah, so like, okay, how do I negotiate and navigate this? But when I went to Sarah Lawrence, I never thought of myself as creative and I didn't even really think of myself as creative there, but I was beginning to be exposed to creative people. And that's when I started dancing. And I think the thing that's interesting about starting something late. So everybody in the dance program at Sarah Lawrence had been dancing their whole lives. I had never danced before. This was my first, soiree at it. And I was the worst. I was the worst in every single class I took for all 4 years. I was the worst person. And there's something really interesting about being the worst because somebody's got to be the worst. And sometimes that's you. And then what do you do with being the worst, and how do you handle being the worst? And I think for me, I was really committed to learning the art form of dance for a variety of personal reasons. It became therapy for me. It became an antidepressant. It became how I was coping with like a really deep experience of mourning and the loss of a friend, my best friend. So dance was much more emblematic than just an activity that I did. And I'm not sure if that's my constitution. I'm not sure if that's something that's specific to me, but I would almost argue that physical connection is emblematic for everybody. Yet we don't always know like what our ultimate physical expression is and to what degree and to what pace and to what sense we should be committing ourselves to it. And I think one of the things that's really complicated about physicality is that often it's put into these structures and the confines of a gym. And I can't, I mean, some people maybe really do enjoy a gym workout, or you're working out for the sake of working out. I'm not saying people don't enjoy that, they do, but I
There's
always
a
kind
different
of
motivation behind the artistic kind of stuff you were talking about. I mean, it's not just upkeep of the machine; it's more
expression
cathartic,
of
dare
the
we say?
machine.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Expression of it. And I think upkeep it is important, but I also think expression and exploration is an important part of our relationship to the body. And I do think that I talk a lot about beauty and how there is this desire to always be beautiful in what we do, and dance is not necessarily have to be about beauty, and physical exploration doesn't have to be about beauty. It can be about something very different. And I think that's something that I try to like bring out in myself and bring out in others in like classes that I do is to just explore sensation and observation versus judgment and expectation. And I think that when we see the body in that way from this observational place and like, whoa, what kind of odd things can it do? And like, and then also what kind of beautiful things can it do? Both of those things are meaningful, but I think that a lot of times we get stuck and stagnant in the concept of things being beautiful or perfect or pleasing.
Yes, I was just looking at your chart for a second because you asked, "Is this in my constitution or whatever?" I mean, you have Saturn, which is like your structure, um, limits and stuff like that. You might have had health issues at some point, but
Oh yes, I have. I have had health
there you
issues.
go. Saturn, Mars is your conjunct. Your action is conjunct Jupiter, which is your expansion and your North Node. It's all in seventh house Virgo. And this is a lot to be said. It's like you are here to basically work on health with others in relationship. I mean, you are designed for that. So
Oh,
it
okay, cool.
and with your Venus in 12th house Pisces, like you're gonna just see the beauty in the high weird, like the very fringe stuff more than most. Um, I'm just rambling about your chart, but it's not surprising to me that I feel almost like I forget the guy's name from like the 80s or whatever with the kind of afro who wore spandex and
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh,
you know who I'm talking
what is?
about.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I couldn't tell you. I could figure it out, I guess.
It's on the tip of my tongue. It's right there, but I can't remember. Ron something Simmons?
Yes, yes. Simmons. We'll just
Yes?
say Simmons. Yeah, that's totally his name. Jeffrey Simmons, maybe, or Ron,
Something
or
like that.
who cares? But the guy, and then there was like in the 80s, the PBS guy with the bodysuit. I mean, that's like your department. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. This guy had like this see-through, like kind of like your innards on a latex like
Oh, yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
yes, let's
Yeah.
stretch and all. I mean, he wasn't going, buck wild about it, but that's kind of the vibe you're gonna always have where it's participatory. You have seventh house heavy stuff. Your actions are always going to be in teams or partnerships, if you want to put it that way. Um, and you're good at it. I mean, people like you. Um, I'm just rambling about your chart. You probably don't care, but the point is, you're built to kind
I
of give a
do care
message
about
through
my
people.
chart. If you
All right,
think I
yeah, hey,
haven't had my chart read
you were
by
talking about HD.
multiple
Yeah, yesterday.
witches in my life, you are incorrect. I
I
am always interested.
It's always fun to just kind of peer under the hood and be like, that's what's going on. Okay, the squirrel engine, I get it. But yeah, you're really designed to do a lot of health through people and teaching. I mean, teaching is a weird way to put it, but it's like performative acts that become embodied for health reasons and practical. It's not just like, you're holding a skull and reciting Hamlet necessarily. It's more, which I'm sure you could do. But you're more like, it's really funny. Your gesticulations are so on point and kind of correct, I guess, in terms of a post linguist or a pre-linguistic kind of fronting. You should make your own little thesaurus, like a physical thesaurus. I don't know if that's
That's
possible.
funny.
You
That's
should do it,
funny.
or a dictionary. Just be like, because, dude, if y'all haven't checked out her videos, I mean, we'll plug it later. Or now, shit, she's got a YouTube channel and it's great. And some of the more helpful thing, I mean, there's funny absurdism, like Dadaism almost, right? There's highly absurd things, but it's still educational and very contemplative. And then there's the Gyration Nation. I swear, you only did 3 videos, and I'm like, this is like you should be putting in workshops with this. Doing it. I mean,
Yeah, no, it's funny. Before we talked, I was literally like, okay, I'm finally gonna write like what my workshop offering is. Yeah. So yes, yes,
on
yes, yes.
sync,
And
on point.
did do a lot of classes for a while because I guess what I believe is that our intellectual mind knows a lot of things, right? Like I can look at my past or I could look at my relationship with my parents. I could look at my core wound and I can intellectualize to you and say how I should be healed from it or how I have compassion for those and I've worked through these issues from a cerebral point and I understand that this happened and therefore my parents had this reaction and therefore I had this it's like we are capable of doing that, especially if you're somebody who dances with self-reflection. I think you hit a point where you have understood yourself and you could communicate to another person why you are the way you are, but that doesn't mean that those deep impulses are just gone, and it doesn't mean that your core sadness has just dissipated. And I think if we are going to really get into the healing and like the true healing of our soul or psyche, because our soul is probably just fine, but to heal the psyche, I think there's so much that we can do with somatics and do with the body and have this conversation and really let go, really, really, truly let go, and not just tell ourselves that we've let go, not just say the thing that we know we should say because we've gone through the the
That's a
therapy or the
phase though.
nonviolent communication.
Yeah, like the psychoanalytic kind of ego. I mean, there's nothing wrong with ego. You have to have an operative self or what, it's like it is what it is. But like the prefrontal cortex is one, it's got its drawbacks, I guess. But what you're saying is kind of, and I keep referencing Terrence McKenna. I haven't really thought about him in a hot minute, but his archaic revival. I mean, we've pushed the limits on gnosis so much, and like kind of articulation of a certain mode of thinking, Western kind of articulation of breaking things down. It's Solway and coagula, right? We've solved, and we've got to really kind of melt back into the coagulation of it, where it's like that's kind of alchemical stuff, which I think you dig. But what you're talking about is embodied and somatic. It's exactly correct. I mean, I just helped a family friend. Gave her a ride from the airport the other day, and she was at a somatic. She's 66. I think her birthday's tomorrow. Shout out. But she was like, "Oh, I just did this somatic thing, and I was, crying and releasing things that I never thought of." And she's an Aquarius, right? So she's like, she's definitely mental. She gets it. She can see the schematic and all this stuff. And there's a difference between seeing the path and walking the path, right? Or
Yeah.
knowing it here and then doing the thing, which I really did appreciate. Once again, I keep hitting on your Gyration Nation videos, but it's like you were like, everybody says they have a practice, and it's kind of like the magic school bus, or whatever metaphor I like. There's an intellectualization where you have to digest it that way, and like you learn the concepts. You have to conceptualize things, but then it turns into an adoption and a being the thing. And there's many phases of that, so you don't want to like hold on too tightly to any one modality or whatever. But yes, you're hopefully you're comfortable. By the way, speaking of somatics, um, your videos, I was participating as much as I could. It was like 4 a.m. and I was just like, I gotta catch up on what she's about, or else I'll sound like adult. But basically, you were even doing just little things about control. That was really profound to me. The control. It's like this hand's doing whatever the fuck ever, and now try to control that. And it's like these are
Yeah, that's
models
a
that you
good
just don't think
one.
about, and then you can apply it to all sorts of stuff. It's like, oh look, this is people taking over the Congress, and this is the police saying no, or whatever. You could extrapolate it anywhere. But if you want to talk about, well, we could keep talking about college and stuff, but we've dipped now a little obviously into physicality, and we can kind of take this any which way. I don't know if you want to keep going linear style, or if you want to just kind of pop out like a little dolphin and do your thing.
I like to I like to dolphin it around. Again, I'm so tired of my own story that I'm just like,
It's new to
"Ugh."
us. I know you're
I know
like
you,
you're trying to shed the story, and we're like, hey, tell us your
but like,
greatest
but
hits.
what's the story, man?
Yeah, exactly.
Um, I think the thing that I really like to improvise in a certain setting, and I love to improvise when it comes to working with others around healing. So when I think of a concept like rage, I'm like, okay, well, let's explore rage. And then I get into a group with people and we all have the objective to explore rage. And then all of these ideas come to me in that moment about how to explore our relationship to rage. And so I think one of the things that happens when we want to work with others is that there is this quantum collaboration and co-creation. So even if I am a facilitator and I'm the one who's doing the speaking, the energy of the people that are in the room with me are informing me, and they are my muse in that moment of like how we are going to physically explore a certain concept. And I think that it's really interesting when you look at creativity. Creativity, I personally believe, flourishes with boundaries. So I love giving myself boundaries and I love giving myself assignments, because once I have these boundaries, and then I suddenly everything blasts open in a really interesting way. So if I just said to myself, Tony, do a workshop, I would kind of be like, oh, I don't know. But if I was like, Tony, do a workshop about healing sibling abuse from ages 6 to 9, I would suddenly feel really creative in that, because I would have to tickle different parts of my brain that I wouldn't necessarily know I had to wake up. So I think when we do healing work, there's often this assumption that there is the healer and then the person being healed, or like, I am the therapist and I am then telling you, patient, what to do, rather than, hey, let's both go into this space where we both collectively want healing to take place. And whether you know it or not, I'm going to heal from this. And whether I know it or not, you're going to heal from this. And even though I might be facilitator, that doesn't mean I am beyond the experience of healing. This is a healing for me as well.
It's that
And I think that
holographic
if,
card, right? It's like,
yes,
look,
and
y'all,
I
it's not
think if we
a
all
yogi and a
approached
yogini.
it
Keep going.
this way, it would be so much deeper rather than, oh, I'm going to my doctor. My doctor's going to fix me and then I'm going to be all better. It's like, no, healing is collective. Healing is a dance that you do. It's like, when you go and a doctor operates on you, your body still does the healing. Your body still does a lot of that work. It's not just the doctor. These are collaborations. So I think for me, that's what's so fascinating and interesting about somatic work is every time I go into an experience to work with people, I also am being in a space to heal the self, So it's a entwined double helix.
You have a whole lot of Virgo energy, like I said, Mars, Jupiter, North Node. It's in seventh house kind of energy. The moon, I just got a message. I mean, how dumb new agey am I? It's like the moon is now in Virgo. It's like, but of course, that's the Hermit card, right? So it's coming out. But this is a different kind of Hermit. It's one that's been in the depths and is showing it for the sake of others. It's not just hiding it under a bushel, so to speak. What you were kind of saying though made me think of what we're dealing with, and you mentioned it earlier, and I really want to get into it at some point, or not, now or whatever. But postmodernism, modernism, kind of schisms. It made a lot of sense at one point to be like, look, we have to standardize some stuff. we need a tried and true method, if you want to put it that way, like scientific methods and kind of standardization. You know what I'm saying? Like the past 300 years, we're at the end of it now, clearly, because now people are just kind of doing the Wall-E thing, where they're just kind of passive consumers of a system that's maybe working or not, and they just kind of go with the flow.
Yeah.
Whereas what you were kind of referencing was it's tricky because it's not postmodern to the degree where it's like everybody is their own guru. I mean, that's a little of it, but because way earlier on you were talking about like I forget how you phrased it, but you were just like, it's not like an ideological no man's land where anything goes. Like it's not Mad Max out here. Like there's got to be some kind of rules. You weren't like poo-pooing postmodernism necessarily, but you were kind of, it struck me as that you weren't like all about it, and yeah, if you were to watch your videos, I'd be like, this is a acid eating Dadaist, and they're, whatever. I would just assume automatically that you're like the most progressive, you know what I mean? Like you embody a very postmodern laissez-faire kind of reality. So I'm wondering, what do you think the benefits are of structure? Because you're a Capricorn with a lot of Virgo energy. So I think what you were saying a minute ago is like, you can't, don't just be like anything goes. And it's a lot less. You need prompts, like writing prompts. I think Miles Davis said like, learn the theory, right, and then improvise when you know the theory, then toss it away. It's like, it's one thing. Have you ever seen Yoko Ono sing with Frank Zappa or John Lennon or whatever? That's you gotta YouTube this sometime. It's on the one hand, it's art, sure. On the other hand, it's like cacophonic kind of overzealous weirdness. She's an Aquarius. I'm rambling. Jesus Christ, sorry. But what are your thoughts on kind of modernism and postmodernism? We'll kind of tug at your philosophy degree a little here. If you don't want to talk about this, that's fine too. You can say, "Shut the fuck up, Jim. I don't want to talk
So,
about this."
Jim, before you change the 10th tangent, I'll let you reply, Tony, and then I brought a special guest who I was thinking about just as we started, or as you were talking now about movement and so on, which is a dear friend of mine, and maybe he has some input or some questions too. Actually, somebody we interviewed before. But
Is
first,
it
Tony.
Frank?
Oh wow! See, Jim
I
has
must be psychic.
got it on the deck. So, Tony.
So I think, the overall consensus is that in order to reject something, you must know it. So if you want to be an abstract painter, it's probably going to behoove you to learn the structures of painting and theory and color, et cetera, and then in order for you to truly abstract from something, you had to have understood the structure of which you're abstracting from. And I think that that is both true and untrue because the problem is that once you really embed yourself within a structure of truthness, of of universal understanding of something, then to truly abstract from it, you're always going to be in reaction to it. It's like within a patriarchy, does feminism really exist? Because feminism is always in reaction to patriarchy. So what is feminism within that? It's it's not even its own thing. It's a reaction of something. It's a reaction of something that wouldn't even be significant without the thing it's reacting to.
Which
So
gets tricky
I
because it's like causally necessary in that sense. It's like this is how the tree branches, bifurcate or whatever. It's like tick, 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 cause and effect and reaction, counterpoint, all this kind of stuff. What you're saying, um,
right.
but we're at this weird place now. When you say feminism, it's like uh, it gets very political. I don't even want to get very political, but it's like I guess people like in America we have like free the pursuit of happiness, so that can be defined very broadly at this point. So I guess if somebody wants to be a 5-year-old and go through sex change, if it is, do they know what their happiness is defined as? Is this a cultural reaction? Is this coming from? It gets tricky so quick. We don't have to go down that rabbit hole, but the point is, um, it seems like we're like Terrence McKenna. God, you'd think I was like worshiping at his feet. Talks about the transcendental object at the end of time, like just where psychedelics would be the lubrication for the times, and it seems post 2012, it's been fucking crazy out here. I mean, I trip and used to smoke and grow and stuff, but it's like that really helped. I'm raw dogging it now, which is kind of hard, but it's crazy times. I don't think it's just me. I think we're all like being presented with a clear history of reality that made sense, but it's not fitting. It's kind of like a Chris Farley, fat man in a little suit kind of thing. It's like its garments are Armani. That's great, but it's not quite fitting. And it worked at one point, but it's not working. But that doesn't mean burn all the clothes and like flay yourself or whatever. Like hyper reactionism. So it's hard to know how to nuance this. And I want to say for the record, this is why astrology is great and kind of self awareness. Not everybody is gonna, some people want to walk barefoot, some people want to wear Uggs, some people are gonna do stiletto pumps in the club or whatever. So it's not a one size fits all reality. But it seems that we've come to a westernized crescendo where we all have the same script, and then we're kind of looking at each other saying, "This isn't really working, but we have to do it because why wouldn't we do it?" But that's kind of where your essence is coming in. It seems like you understand the fundamentals, but you're playing with the edge, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that's where, from a modernist, postmodern perspective, this is where imagination and creativity is so important because if you just follow the script or if you just look at history and you don't question the narrative and you don't say, well, what is the objective of this narrative? Who benefited from this narrative? How does this narrative serve the structures that are, you know, most financially, really, and from a power perspective, are exalted, right? And so everything that we're looking at in terms of science, in terms of history, in terms of art, these are things that have been designed and allowed, and basically nothing that threatening has flourished to a point of it being within popular culture, because the second it becomes popular culture, it is not a threat. It is not, and I think that's the thing that is most disheartening. And I think one of the biggest things, is like, hey, let's get rid of borders. Hey, let's get rid of money. Hey, what's that going to look like? And if you say stuff like that, if you say, well, we should really just abolish borders and money and then, start from there, the the reaction you will get from people, um because that takes a lot of imagination to understand how we would then be organized. And I think people want to be organized because if like we're all kind of still children, nothing is more unsettled than a child with no rules. Like they actually are not that happy. As somebody who's raised a child, like some rules are really important, but those rules have to have like a certain benevolence, and the rules of society that we exist in, there is no benevolence. It's not looking out for your best interest or mine at all. So I think that long story long, I do think radical authenticity is going to need radical changing of structures.
Yeah, there's momentum behind money, for example, or whatever. Rome wasn't built in a day, so whatever we're going to come up with next is going to trickle in, whether it's crypto or barter system. I was like, why isn't there like a website where people like say what their trade is or value and be like, I'll give you an hour massage. What are you going to offer me? It's like a Craigslist
I'm
of like
sure there
bartering.
is.
There actually are all kinds of different
Well,
systems.
what the fuck? I'm 8 days
So,
back, I guess.
anyhow, before you go on any further, Jim, I'll bring in Frank if that's okay with you, Tony. He's also I would say, experimental dancer, but let him introduce himself, and I think you'll greatly enjoy each other's insights. Welcome, Frank. Here we are.
Hello, hello. Do you hear me? Can you understand me?
Yes, perfect.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, hello everybody. I was just
What's up, Frank?
spontaneously, I got invited to this conversation, and I find it really interesting what you were talking right now. Greetings from Berlin. It's super cold. I'm in my kitchen because my girlfriend is sleeping, and here I am. Just a question, Tony. Are you the actress who was making this videos that went viral?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna take credit for that. Yes, that's me.
Cool, super good. Especially the one you made with this psychiatrist.
Oh yes.
It explained it so well. It nailed the opinion of that time like perfectly. It was like beautiful. Yeah.
Well, welcome, Frank. So I might just steer it in a direction with your production company. Okay, so let's just say you graduated from Sarah Lawrence with a philosophy degree, and I mean, were you just like, hell yeah, I'm going to change the world from the inside out and use my hyper weirdness to change the structure? Because you've been doing I mean, we call this episode "Learning by Cavelight." That's a weird Plato's cave illusion / you've got Cavelight Productions. So when did you start making content at a very specific level? And you've kind of branched off into a few places: comedy, dance, and then comedy kind of combined. Like stand up is not quite the same thing as these videos where, like he was saying, they're almost sketches, I guess you could say. Tell us a little about how you got into that, and we'll try to get to dance stuff, which Frank can relate to more. But we'll get to the present ASAP, I guess is my point.
Yeah, no, and now I want to check out Frank's work. I'm super curious. I think, when you're the type of person that has a compulsion, right? I have a compulsion. It's not just like I like have no chill. I'm like, we must talk about this. We must get to the deep underbelly of yourself and everything that goes around. Because I do believe that in order for us to grow and evolve as a society, we must grow and evolve as humans, right? And that spiritual evolution is integral because if we just like we're like, oh cool, let's just fucking chop down everything, and we have the same spiritual spiral that we're at, like how are we going to actually create something that's new? We're just gonna like it's like the movie or the book The Beach where you're like, well, we're just gonna go start this intentional community where like I fuck your wife and then I get really pissed about it and then like, fuck you, let's burn it to the ground.
That was
So
kind of a
there's
lame
just
mushroom trip montage, for the record. I get at the time it was like Banjo Kazooie or something like that.
oh
But they
yeah,
could have done so much better. Anyway, I
they
didn't
could
mean to
have
cut you
done
off.
better, but it's like I love the concept of intentional communities. I think they're very interesting. I think from a standpoint of looking at philosophical examples of what the future can bring, we should turn our attention to intentional communities because these are the people that are trying to restructure how we relate to each other. But if you're starting an intentional community with your same emotional caca that you've already, haven't really healed or you've already, blasted out into the universe, then I'm not exactly sure we're going to be doing the work we need to be doing. So I guess for me, everything that I've been trying to do in my whole life is about that spiritual exploration and that spiritual evolution. And I'm just sharing my personal spiritual journey. That's all I'm doing is sharing what I go through. And sometimes I am up and sometimes I am down. And I share both. I don't just like try to be like, I'm so evolved and like, look at me. I accept myself fully all the time. I'm so authentic. It's like, no, I care about what people think about me. I cry because someone writes me an email that hurts my feelings. Like, and I will express that as much as I can, because I think that I'm all right. This is where I'm at in the spiral. Like, you can write an email and you can hurt my feelings. And I can cry for 3 days about it because I don't like your shitty email. So I think that like for me and like what dance has done, I just like, I am not the best dancer on planet Earth. There is a 3-year-old who lives in Germany right now who's a better dancer than I will ever be. And I've seen them on the internet do 20 headspins. Like, there is no way that I'm trying to be the best at dance. The only thing I'm trying to do is use different ways of speaking. So like, I have body speaking, I have stand-up speaking, I have sketch speaking, I've written scripts, I wrote a fucking book. Like, I'm just trying to share my experience at a manic degree, for sure, and these are just all different platforms of which to do it, because people learn differently. People get tickled by different things. Some people are like, your dancing videos, you're just spaz. Like, you should sit down and just fucking talk, you dumb bitch. And other people are like, why are you so still? Why aren't you dancing around? What are you doing not dancing, you dumb bitch? And either way, you can be a dumb bitch to somebody. So you just have to fucking put it out. Oh my God,
Yeah.
it would be a dream to make Joe Rogan cry, but like in a good way.
Give him bad DMT,
I want
I
to
guess.
connect. I would love to connect to him. Sorry, I just saw that comment.
No, yeah, check out respond to anything. It's funny because I think one of the things that it's trite, I guess, at this point in a new age community sense, was like, it's the dawning of the age of Aquarius. What is Aquarius? Kind of like everybody has tattoos and wears weird clothes and has lingo that's bizarre, and that's not a problem. But like the whole zeitgeist itself is eccentric, I guess you could put it, largely, and it's just bleeding more and more that way. I mean, even as Americans, we had Donald Trump as a president. It's like, is this really happening? Right? It's like it's bizarre. It's bizarre world out here. So I think one of the things that you can be proud of, Toni, is that you're being authentic, but it's not just about being authentic. I mean, in a sense, everybody's exactly shining as bright as they can in the hologram at any given time. You know what I mean? In a sense, there's no inauthenticity. It's just a matter of like, how aware of it are you and all this kind of jazz. You're being really authentic, which is dope, but also you're it's eclectic. I mean, you're taking, I don't know, some of the philosophers that you like. I've read for Terrence McKenna a lot, Alan Watts, maybe some of these kinds of people you're into. Maybe not. I mean, lay it on me, whoever you're into, in terms of the roots of your thinking, because I think, and it's probably a lot of your own thinking too, but we're echo chambering kind of the 60s and 70s, like their idealism has trickled in enough now to kind of make I was thinking about it, it's not a subculture, it's an ultra culture or something like that, where it's like we get like, the yin and yang, and now we're trying to kind of break that fourth wall or something, like be the third perspective. But that doesn't mean we're out of the yin and yang. Like sometimes we're good, sometimes we're bad, sometimes we're hip, sometimes we're losers, whatever. I am rambling. Who are some of the thinkers that have influenced your sketches, or comedians that, like we were naming comedians? If you said 0 people I have done this in the abyss, I would believe it. So it's all good. You don't even have to reference anybody. But the guy, I'm forgetting, Gene Wilder, you strike me a little like him a little, where he was kind of playing with stuff and he was authentic, but likable. I mean, it's weird. Some people can be very absurd and it's hard to digest. You know, yours is right. I mean, you had that guy watching you. I forget his name now already. That little Jewish guy, and he wasn't
Ben
like
Shapiro.
Ben Shapiro. I'll never forget it again. Sorry, Ben. He wasn't like vomiting at it. It was like the bearded lady at the circus or whatever. He was like, "What's going on?" But I think he needed to see it in that way. Like his world is devoid of these colors and these ideas. And even if he's not going to jump on the bandwagon and do these things himself necessarily, you could tell he was kind of enjoying himself. Dare I say? Like I think he was being watered in a weird way. Like he was, he didn't hate on it. He was like, "That's great, okay." Like it was kind of interesting to see, because it wasn't like he was going to burn down Paris like during a Tchaikovsky, opening of the Spring of Rite, or Rite of Spring rather. he didn't overreact. So I'm just kind of rambling, Gemini life. Sorry. But who are some of the thinkers that you tend to kind of huff their fumes? Maybe we've heard of them, maybe not, because I'm always interested. How are you kind of shaping your ontology? And do you have like creed, not a creed or a motto, but it's like what's your kind of schematic for when you approach these projects, whether it's production, your music videos. Honestly, it reminded me a little of Talking Heads or Frank Zappa a little, where it's like the humor, especially of the Meggings video. I saw that and it was like, you're peeing on me or whatever. It's like, or it's like getting wet or whatever you said, because there's a little tune, but then there's like little asides that are kind of like Where's Waldo jokes, and hopefully people pick up on that. So anyway, I just buckshotted you with a bunch of questions. Answer whatever you'd like, Avi.
So I think one of my favorite philosophers is Spinoza. Do y'all know Spinoza?
I've done heard his name. I think barely. He could be German even.
I think he was Dutch.
Okay,
So
strike two.
Spinoza, he wrote all his philosophies in mathematical proofs. And I always thought that was a really interesting approach to kind of look at philosophy through the lens of mathematics. Also, Spinoza had this objective. He wanted to live out the ultimate philosophical life. And so he was reacting to, the like the Hobbes and the Descartes of this time or what have you. And he who was the one that he was really reacting to? There was one Christian philosopher that was such a dick.
Kierkegaard?
No, there was another one. It's
know.
on the well, it'll come to me. Some little Christian fucker. But
So Spinoza wanted to be Mario with the
and
star. He
Spinoza
wanted to kick
was
it.
Jewish. But Spinoza, like what I really appreciated about him was his objective to live out this philosophical ideal. And so he wanted his life to embody philosophy. And as someone who studied philosophy, I always wanted to see if I could live my life out in a philosophical way. And I do think that philosophy and spirituality, especially Buddhism, are, obviously Buddhism is considered a philosophy in a lot of circles. So I think most circles. I don't think anyone would deny that Buddhism is a philosophy.
Yeah, it's not a theology because there is no God, right?
Right. So
it's a philosophy.
I think in terms of how to live philosophically is a question that I've always been devoted to and wanting to live my life philosophically. And so I think my influence has always been approaching any subject from a philosophical lens. But I don't know. It's funny. You want to do something. Nothing is unique. Nothing is fucking unique. We're always influenced by one another, and we are always picking up on little things in the unconscious. So, in a certain sense, what I'm most influenced by is what makes me laugh when I think about it. Like when I have an idea, like when some silly idea comes to me, like meggings, like, oh, I think it's funny. Men wearing meggings. Like that's, and if it makes me laugh, I will not rest until I've made this thing. So I have thousands of ideas on my computer. And if I laugh once, I will write it down and then I will pursue it in whatever form. So anything that makes me laugh, I will examine. But I always want to examine in a sense where there is this element of like social critique or social exploration or philosophical tickling. I always want to be philosophically tickling people.
So there's like a function to your exploration. It's not just hyper romantic Wagnerian. You're not just like, oh, kind of going for it. It's self-referential. It's self-aware. That's why I said Talking Heads or Frank Zappa. It feels like kind of like Deadpool or something, looking at the camera and being like, is this really happening? Or whatever.
Is this really happening?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm not like Tim and Eric, although I love Tim and Eric, but
they are chaos magicians or something. Zwei Dunkeljungen.
Truly. But there is always something holding me back from being just in that realm of pure chaos and absurdity, which is I need to be reflecting.
You're Capricorn with Virgo stuff. Thank God you're not. I mean, they're like a ketamine trip that never ends or something like that or whatever. It's just like this weird headspace. It had to exist, and now Old Spice commercials and stuff like that kind of have sprouted those wings from this absurdism. I forget if it was Timothy Leary or who, but they were like, the further along we go, the more psychedelic things are going to get, commercials, whatever. If you just pretended that you fell on Earth right now, like an alien landing on Earth, and just kind of looked at stuff, it's hyper surreal right now. I mean, it's just crazy. And I'm not really hating on it when I say it's crazy, but it seems like
Kind
super
of wondering,
saturated.
Jim, how you're still surprised. But I want to give the
Well,
call to Frank as well to see if he has any questions or comments on all that Tony said, or anything you want to contribute, Frank.
Well, Tony, I'm just by these things you said before, I'm totally like, I don't know what to say, because for me it is some sort of like, I have topics in my life that are relevant for me and my focus lies on it, and you nailed it like perfectly. Sorry if I said it, but you and me, we are pretty much the same, and that's why I want to express my 100% and 110% respect for you being that integral to yourself, because I know this is upsetting many people's. I mean, like, you are like some sort of a harlequin. We are harlequins, or let's say the first card in the Crowley tarot,
The
the
fool.
the fool. The fool is always considered as some sort of, let's say, foolish, but foolishness also, which is something nobody talks about, also invites geniusness. So in order to be the fool, you must be able to invite accidents. Some are bad, some are genius, and to be the one who tickles people, you have to be really strong for this, because you're like, in the first place they will hang you, and then 2 weeks later they will say, hey, thank you very much for telling me this. Actually, I thought about this. It was you're right. Yeah, okay, but I was hanging. You still hang me there. Yes. So, and yeah, it's some sort of you have to be strong for this. Especially in the spiritual community. Did I have streaming problems? No.
I hear you.
All
no,
right.
you sound fine.
No, you're fine.
Okay. Yeah. And
She is a
in this,
Capricorn. She's built to last in that sense.
you have to be to last. Yeah. And yeah, it's right now. There is a book. I don't know who wrote it, but it comes from the States. It's called One Wrong Word or something like this. Like, right now we are at the point where the insecurities, or let's say the inferior complexes of another person, is like a mine. Like, while you speak everything cool, but don't touch that one word, don't touch that one specific topic, or it's over.
Mm.
And that is like a really difficult situation for us harlequins, because you have to be really careful what jokes you make, because some jokes people will not laugh about it. They will react really strong. And yeah, I was a few weeks, I teach flow movement. Yes, I teach people how to listen to themselves and how to let their body move them. And so the most receptive audience that I have for my work is within the ecstatic dance community. I think you know what it is exactly, right? This is the same community that also saw your videos, like your video. Everybody saw your video. Yes, it went everywhere. By the way, we should connect to each other. Just a side note: if you want to come to Germany, I'll organize you a workshop.
Oh yeah, I want to
Yeah.
come. Let's do
Yes,
it.
that's good. Let's exchange contacts. So yeah, but the spiritual community, in my opinion, is now should evolve. It's time to evolve. And yeah, I cannot participate in this anymore, because I'm, like you said, in order to get out of it, you have to first fully get into it, or let's say the only way out is in. And I was in the spiritual community for long time, and it's enough for me. It's enough.
Right.
Yeah,
It's got its own like piety to it, it seems at this point. I don't know your chart off the top of my head, Frank, but it's like the trickster element has always got to exist, like the fool card, like you were saying. And that means offense is going to happen, but we're living in a kind of post Me Too kind of it's a tricky time of identity politics and populism.
And let me just say, because we talk about archetypes, the fool or the harlequin, however you want to put it, the heyoka or whatever other words, is always by definition outside of any group, any preconception, any dogma. So the fool actually has to run in front of all the popularized things or whatever, and can never fully fit inside it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be the fool, you know, because that's the edge of exploration of consciousness, you know. So just to add that.
thank you. Thanks for
So
appreciating that.
yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. So what are y'all's thoughts on populism and meeting expectations? I mean, authenticity, like Frank was saying, is tricky in a market that won't, like Louis C.K., right? That's a good example. He was authentically doing his thing, I guess, and it did not work out for him. In a personal lifestyle choice kind of way. But how do you guys look at how do I put this? You wanna jam with the tune. You don't want to be so abstract that it doesn't fit the music of life, but at the same time, you want to be able to take the themes in new directions. So how do you see the kind of catalyst nature for your artwork within the confines of populism? In a weird way, I have like a very I don't give a fuck energy, and maybe y'all have that too at some core level. Where it's just like, look, I mean, obviously we all want to, like, it's, there's subconscious drivers that like we want to be a part of community and we want to be accepted, I'm sure, but then there's a rebelliousness kind of, I won't go say Luciferian because that's a little strong, but it's like there's this Promethean kind of energy where it's just like, I'm gonna do this whether it's permissible or not and popular or not. If whether the gods put me on a rock and get the bird to eat my guts every day, I don't care. I think it's worthwhile. There's a risk there, and I think the reward is in and of itself. But I'm just kind of wondering how y'all, especially with the comedy, Tony, how you kind of weave, because you're saying very explicit things, which I'm not offended by, but I would think that there's definitely certain, it's a weird way to put it, like progressive liberals wouldn't all love it necessarily, even though it's touching identity politics and progressivism. Kind of, see what I mean? It's like, it doesn't fit exactly. I think you would still offend people. How do you deal with offending and expectations and all that jazz, I guess, is the long-winded question.
Frank, did you want to go first, or? So I think it's about intention. And what is your intention in the moment of creation? I personally believe intention is what people are reacting to when they consume any art. So if I take a photograph, I have said this before, but I am an amazing photographer. I take unbelievable pictures of people. It's not because I know anything. It's because I am very excited to take your picture. I see you as like truly beautiful in that moment. I am just like really into maybe the lighting. I do know a bit about lighting, but I take these unbelievably beautiful pictures of people and they love them because I see them as beautiful and that's what they're reacting to. That's what they see. They see themselves through my eyes when they look at the picture. So I think that if I make a video where my intention is just to share myself and to share something that I thought was interesting, that's going to just be the energy that I put out. And I will feel really comfortable about that. So there was one video I put out about like BlackRock, BlackRock and Vanguard being like the monopoly within the monopoly of our financial system. I felt like I had a good intention by sharing that video and making that video. And I did, the research that I was capable of doing within the dark webs that I exist in. And so if people are like, I don't agree with you, you're dumb, you don't understand capitalism, I'm like, okay, like I felt pretty good making that video. Also, like cute outfit I was wearing, and like I thought it was fucking funny. So when I make something in that way, I am not very much touched by what people say because I felt like I was working with an integrity. If I make a video where I like have like a little objective in my son, I hope this goes viral. Like, yeah, I hope people like this video. Yeah. And then somebody is like, oh, your video is stupid. I'll be like, oh my God, oh no, like I feel so bad. So I just have to always force myself to just, when I'm feeling like my full integrity, that's the time to make videos. When I'm trying to like be seen, because I'm like, oh, my hair looks cute, I should be seen. Those are like not my best videos, you know? So I think that that's the place you just have to kind of keep settling in. And as a comedian, yes, I am here to push boundaries. I'm here to make people, I hate these things. I like feel like I'm only doing it for you, and like my brain is being melded by Apple
Your
right now.
sacrifice is duly noted. Thank
I'm
you.
not
I don't fuck
happy.
with
I
that stuff. I get
only
Bluetooth.
like
it.
I only like analog, but everyone's like, I can't hear you. So I'm like, okay, fine. And like now I'm just a digital cyborg. But my point
You're part of the
is
singularity,
that
like your video or whatever.
yeah,
You've done
no,
it.
like
Here you are.
I'm like, what a dork. Like I don't have a stupid thread. I like the thread. The thread's cool. Whatever. I'll let it go. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. It's the intention. So as a comedian, I want to push buttons. I do. I want to make people think differently, but I don't want to alienate them in the process of making them think differently. So I once did a show that was the most conservative, like politically conservative crowd I'd ever done a show for in my life. And I knew this because I was watching the comedians go on before me. They were dropping words that were not okay, about from like a societal. I was like, I cannot believe these words are being said. I almost left the venue. I didn't know what to do. I'm like, these people are going to crucify me. There was lots of guns. People were very excited about their guns. And then at some point, someone said, "Is anyone here a feminist?" This is 150 people, not a fucking word, not one word, not one person was like, "Women are cool." It was like 70% men. I was like, I'm gonna fucking die tonight. I was like, but I had a set, and my set was like my set, like, and I was just like, I'm not gonna not do my set, but you would never think that the set I had written was going to work for this like conservative group of dudes obsessively. Maybe there was like, out of 150 people, there was like maybe 30 women. Okay. Best show of my fucking life. Truly. Truly the best show of my life. So
But
it taught me
why?
so much.
I mean, what are the reasons?
Because I got people that didn't agree with me to be on board with me. And they were interested in what I was saying, and they were laughing with what I was saying, even though they did not agree with me. And I didn't say, you have to agree with me. That wasn't the contract that we had. The only contract that we had was that, like, I'm here to just like share myself with you. And that's what I'm doing. And they were, for whatever reason, they were tickled by me, And I think
Oh,
because
like
I
the Ben
started,
Shapiro effect, kind of, where they're like,
it was the Ben fucking Shapiro effect. I do not know. I mean, I'm like, something about me. I'm like, I think I just like, I am the medicine for right wing men who just like don't really want to listen to me, but just somehow can't stop themselves from doing it. And
well, they're
it
part
was
of that
truly
archetype, whether they're aware of it or not. There's a subconscious part of us all that wants to play the Harlequin, like they're saying, and the trickster. So
totally.
it's like, even if you get psychopathics, whatever, KKK members or whatever the fuck, every now and then, who are just like American History X style, and it's just like, oh Jesus Christ. But by and large, I think the whole Ben Shapiro effect, if we're gonna coin it that, is that you're releasing steam for him, if that makes sense. Like, these people are
Yeah.
going through the motions so much of these
Yeah.
pious, rigid, either way, left or right, it doesn't matter. Some people are such feminists that like they don't know how to talk with men without like
Totally.
confrontation, oh, I'm gonna beat you up, or I don't, that's a weird analogy, but you know my point. It's like legalism and strictures to fundamentalism. It's like bones. Even a kid's bones grow, like you were saying. There has to be this kind of elasticity to the structure, and if you're not doing that, you're gonna have to find it outside of yourself. And that's kind of what your set, it seems, manifested in their lives. It's like, oh, Sasquatch came here. I don't believe in Sasquatch, but we just saw a Sasquatch, so we're gonna have to process this now. And
Yeah.
good thing not getting like murked on the way out. I'm glad you're still here or whatever.
No, people were like, that was amazing. You were so funny. Like it was shamanic. And it taught me, I'm like, what a bitch. Why was I being such a fucking asshole about these people jumping to so
Well,
many conclusions that they
presuppositions
weren't
are
going to like
bitch,
me?
right? Yeah, we
I
walk in
had a
all of our
lot
baggage.
of assumptions about how I'd be received, and it opened up my mind and it opened up my heart, because the reality is that people that ostensibly agree with me on paper are actually way more judgmental of me as an audience member, right?
That's
And
always the
people that
case.
don't necessarily agree with me, they're probably, maybe their hearts are more open to me for whatever reason. And I think for me as like a person, I am much more interested in the dynamics of conversation that I wouldn't expect. I love to be surprised. I love that me and like a group of men in flannel, just like connected so hard that night. I'm like, what a gift. What a true gift. So, and I think that I like the idea, like, I sometimes I was, for whatever reason, I was feeling for them, or I was giving them permission to feel,
You're
or maybe
midwifing emotions or something,
they were
basically.
identifying with me for whatever reason. So I do think there is something, when comedians say like, oh, you can't say anything in cancel culture. Yes and no, it's both. You can also, I don't know, sometimes I feel like what a cool boundary to try to figure out how to get through. But I gotta say, the most closed-minded people are the people that are like canceling people. Like, oh, okay, like that seems kind of closed-minded.
It's a
We should
different
try to
kind of
forgive them, but
fascism.
okay.
Yeah. It's like liberal fascism. It's like, but it's tricky because there's a place for it. Like it gets astrological. When Me Too was kind of popping in 2016, 2017, Jupiter was in Scorpio. So it was like getting to the bottom of, like, Jupiter's about expansion and kind of like, luck, I guess, and stuff. I'm not going to get all into astrology, but Jupiter was in Scorpio, which is taboos and trauma and sexuality largely. So it's like, of course this stuff was coming up, and I'm not saying it's not going to come up. It seems like it's like the grooves on a record. It's like the song is happening and we're kind of participating with it, and then the manifestation of those grooves looks a lot different than maybe we would all suspect. But like you were saying at the very beginning, it's like it might be a lot more scripted. I'm not like a fatalist necessarily, but it's like we're just singing the song of creation, and the grooves have to go certain sine wave ways and certain holographic kind of interplays. And it's a really privileged time to be around. When you were talking about cancel culture, the first thing that came to my mind is Alex Jones's recent show with Kanye West. I don't know if you watched that. Interesting and kind of pivotal, I guess, in a sense, because people are starting to make intellectual camps. And it's really gonna, how would I put this? It's like The Shining. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, and he goes and kills his family and shit. It's like, and plus he was possessed or whatever. But I think if we lose our sense of play, it doesn't mean you have to be Pee Wee Herman on crack all the time, right? Or whatever. It's like, Jackass is pretty immature, and like Steve-O is in a better place now, I think, generally speaking. We could all agree, right? Than like 10 years ago, if you know Jackass and all that stuff, that culture.
Of course I know Steve-O, and I think you just really glossed over the phrase "when Me Too was poppin'," because I think
I know that's a
the
weird way.
fucking
It was a causally
funniest
necessary
thing
thing.
I've heard in so long. When Me Too was poppin'.
When that thing was like peaking, I was in Switzerland at that point, and I was like, this is going down. People are holding people accountable. And there was like there was a spirit. It's kind of like 9/11, or that's a really bad example, but it's like that sometimes there's something that happens and people get behind it or aware of it in a certain way that's healthy, I guess you could say. And then it fractals really quickly into the projections, drama, non-work trauma.
Can I just say about the Me Too poppin' movement?
Yes,
Okay. Is that I personally believe that if every single man in power was held accountable for raping women and children, we would have the revolution we are looking for.
Yeah, it would be a fundamentally new system.
That would take all the people in power out that need to be extricated from power. So what I thought was really poppin' about Me Too was this possibility that, holy shit, are these people going to be held accountable for their actions? And I believe, just like Occupy Wall Street, just like any movement that's actually threatening, actually has true momentum. What happens? It's co-opted, it is contained,
it's cannibalized.
It's cannibalized, and also it is intentionally destroyed. So I do think that, like, the potential of Occupy Wall Street to really take down the financial system at one moment, there
the
was
impulse
this
is healthy
moment.
and good. Yeah,
and I think the same thing with Me Too is that it had that certain moment of like potential accountability that could have been a genuine revolution. And instead,
I think a lot of people did that. I didn't mean to. I sounded like facetious or something. I didn't.
No. But I love the concept of Me Too popping. That's like actually really funny, and like
you can
a
run
really
with it,
funny
make a
joke.
sketch. Yeah, do it.
But
I won't. That was
do
the limit.
think,
I feel bad about it now. Like, shit, I overspoke.
Don't you dare feel bad about it. It's fucking funny. It's a fucking funny thing to say. And I do think that the same thing is happening with the cancel culture concept, is that at one point people were like, hey, we need to have fucking boundaries that have not been honored. And so there was this group of people who were trying to create societal boundaries about how people are treated and how we communicate. It's like, it was kind of like nonviolent communication manifested in a greater arena. And then I do believe, just like the conspiracy theory thing, I think that conspiracy theories were so threatening that it becomes diluted. It becomes intentionally diluted by the status quo. I think cancel culture is the same thing. I think Me Too was the same thing. There is this infiltration, a psyop movement to destroy all of these bubbling revolutionary thoughts.
Well, it's kind of like sheepdogging. I mean, if you ever watch like Sheeps and Sheepdogs, it's like you gotta have because this sounds crazy because I was never really into the whole MAGA kind of thing. Like I was like, oh sure, if Trump is a time traveler, dope. I'll be surprised, I guess, or whatever. It's like I don't know what reality is, but because anyway. But the point is, I think both from the left and the right, because I've heard things like the Grateful Dead was a psyop, and LSD was given to a bunch of people to make them break down the values of culture, which allows communism to come. I mean, you can go down many rabbit holes with this, right? But it feels like we're being kind of guided. Like when I watch Donald Trump, it's like because a lot of people are like he's a maverick, he's this ace in the hole, he's a voice for the people or whatever. I'm like, he's in the room where it happens, to quote Hamilton, and he's clanking glasses with the Obamas and the Clinton. It's this oligarchy that is, and this gets tricky and very conspiratorial, like pyramidal Illuminati stuffs or whatever. But it's like there's many handlers, I guess you could put it, and they come from in all like we tend to think like, I mean, it's very easy to be like Captain Von Trapp bad, Fraulein Maria good, because she's free and young and whatever, and he's an asshole. And there is, and if The Sound of Music is kind of what I'm alluding to, there is a beauty, I guess, of him kind of coming back into his heart after his trauma and his wife died, and he plays a guitar and he's like, oh my god, my kids have neglected you. I mean, there's a beauty there, but that was a very like 1950s kind of like mode, right? God dang, I'm rambling, but the point is, we're in a post-truth kind of place. It seems that's one of the postmodern issues where it's like between deepfakes. I mean, even the Ukraine war is a good example where it's like I have heard enough of my friends and stuff where they're like the popular sentiment would be like Putin's a bad guy. Fuck him. He's not progressive enough. He's totalitarian, clearly communist, whatever. And there's like kind of reactionary ingrained
Gerade im Telefonat.
habits. You might want to put yourself on mute, Frank. But and I'm not, see, I haven't been paying attention. I just kind of went through a huge breakup and just have been reading books, so I'm not even watching the news. But the point is,
Jim,
Russia is
and
like the
let's go
bad
to
guy.
our guests. How do you say
All right,
about
yeah.
So Tony, anything you want to reply, or I'll let Frank reply, I don't even know,
Yeah.
Jim. Put your question in some
Is it
format.
turtles all the way down? Like, does it matter? Like, it seems like we're just being co-opted left and right. So it's like you were saying with Occupy, it's like, look, 9/11 and these.
Okay, let's make it simple, because what Jim is oftentimes asking is, or these days asking is like, is there any reality? Is there anything to grasp, or is everything just
what's the consensus?
arbitrary?
What are we reaching for? And is it true versus real? Like, anyway, that sounds crazy, I know.
What would be your guys' answer to that? Like how to just create your own perspective that is somewhat maybe healthy. This is my word now.
May I? So the trickster, what Toni is doing, which I can totally relate to your personality archetype, whatever, is that before the trickster triggers something, he does a lot of research to understand what he's actually triggering. He doesn't press the trigger just like that. He presses the trigger because he knows what it is. He studies it. He went down the philosophy. He studied the environment and all that stuff. So to get to Raphael's question, what I personally believe, I studied all kinds of philosophy and spiritual practices and all that stuff, and tried to boil it down to one thing that is, in my opinion, really the absolute truth, which I have learned and known before, but now I, from my own perspective, know life has no inherent meaning. It's just about movement. It's as simple as it is. So if a structure gets congested, I don't know if the English word is correct. Yes, so it starts, it moves and moves, and suddenly it starts to gets blocked. The trickster is the one who sees exactly that small sandcorn that blocks the movement, and he pulls that out, and things can move, continue to move. Yeah, and yeah, actually everything else is just taste. It's just aesthetics. You like that. You like to have some arguments. Some love to go to fight in the cage with others. Some have a fetish there and there, but it's just play. It's just fun. We're here for fun, and yeah, you can start to project your, like, in a lot of this feministic movement is this is like comes from this projection of, let's say, women that project their own failing of making their own life and decision just onto men because it's just a nice target to have. Yeah, that's it. I was The more I learn about life and the older I get, the less I start. I talk, the less I make opinions, the more I'm like, yeah, it's just moving, you know.
Word. Yeah, maybe I wasn't succinct, but it's like it seems like we're getting to a point of polarization, but it's like I don't want to be polarized. Does that make sense? It's like how do I not play the game while still participating in functional being? Like I look, we're political beings whether we vote or not. It sounds weird. We're economic beings just because you live in a neighborhood or a townhouse. Or you see what I
But
mean? It's like
Jim,
we're a part of systems. Go ahead.
you have to polarize. You have to, because polarization creates potential, and potential contains the energy to move. So if Tony and me, if we do stuff on social media, we know from the beginning that we are going to make a division of loading. Like we will polarize, because that's why we do it. We do provoke, and we do polarization in order to get that potential to create movement. So and the potential, like we always speak about unfolding your potential in the spiritual community. You have to unfold my potential, but we never speak about building potential, how to create potential. And potential is some sort of a synonym actually for tension, and that's it. So you have to, in order to live, and the northern Celtic mythology about Thor and Thor, which was the other guy, Odin and all that stuff. I don't know the English word for them. They were saying exactly this: life is about choosing which battlefield to enter, and which one is just a matter of taste. The one wants to fight here, the one wants to fight there, but life is about that mingling and fighting and all this stuff.
How German of you to think this way.
Yeah, I know,
It's
super
like it
German.
is a struggle.
The more I know about myself, the more I think, oh my god, I'm so German. Oh well.
No, it's all
Okay.
good. But we are what we is, to quote Frank Zappa. It's like it is what it is. I'll say one thing and I'll shut the fuck up and let Toni say whatever she'd like to say. What I used to do for fun, I don't know why, Gemini shit, would be eat acid and watch like chaos math fractals. If you've ever watched Mandelbrot tours, basically is what it is. It's like zooms on Mandelbrots, and it's like you start seeing what we're talking about, like tipping points within schematics, where on a social level, it'd be like, this is a revolution. Look, oh my gosh, feminism came in, and now it's reacting to this. Now there's cancel culture. It's to a schematic, which is basically a fractal zoom, which I guess is the hologram infinitely eating itself ouroboreally. I mean, see, once we started, I think we all get it, but then I'm just like, how do we do this chill for others? Like, you're doing a really good job, Tony, of being where you're at. Does that make sense? And you're not trying to prove it, but you're processing aloud, and it's a catalyst, I guess. And I'm just at a point where I'm like, how can we have alchemical catalysts without not offending isn't the right word, but it's like I'm hearing myself. I don't trust the fucking process. And it's like, how can I control this? How can I influence this? It's like, you know what? I gotta just fucking chill the fuck out. I feel like a baby and I'm seeing the breach. It's like, oh, what's gonna happen? Where am I going? Or whatever. And it's like, I can't fucking guess. You're never gonna guess. You get born and start breathing and have a doctor smack you and all this shit. So it's like, I should probably trust. Anyway, I'm rambling. I'm answering my own questions. Like, it's a fractal. It's zooming. It's forever and ever. Amen. And where you find yourself is in the dance, as both of you would probably understand more than I, given my lack of gyratorial acumen or whatever. So, Toni, I just totally ransacked it, but feel free to say whatever you would like to those sentiments or the points we've been making.
Well, I think one of the thing you're referencing is this concept of being in a post-truth society, and kind of what I feel like Frank is saying is that like everything is, I mean, maybe I'm projecting, everything is a question. So the truth is insignificant as much as the process of finding the truth, right? It's like that is your philosophical journey. Is not that we're going to come up with these answers and now, oh cool, we won life, we answered. It's like, no, we are pursuing the investigation of what is dark matter. We're pursuing the investigation of what is the space between atoms. Will we ever know? No. Will it ever stop? Yo, I don't know. Check out the lights. I'm like, Vanilla Ice, who's a dick? But I think
That little
yeah.
that's mine. My guys, fuck off. Copyright. It's like, what, bro? That's a good example, right? Anyway, sorry.
So
It's like
like
vanilla fucking ice.
from a Buddhist perspective, all of this conversation around identity, nationalism, gender, religion, all of these things that are trying to make us feel separate from, these are all just illusions. These are all just causing us suffering. These are all just aspects to our own monkey mind, right? And the monkey mind is attached to division, and the soul is attached to ultimate inclusion. And to fully achieve that in a layman's life, not in meditation practice all day every day, it's really challenging because we all pick up the shiny toy, and that shiny toy at one point might be like a fight with your boyfriend, or it might be like some comment you got on Twitter or whatever. The shiny toy is indicative of distraction, and it's indicative of the way you want to. I think this is kind of what Frank was saying, is like we entertain ourselves with aesthetic, we entertain ourselves with opinion, we entertain ourselves with concepts of what is true and isn't true, when in truth will never be told through language. We will never come to a collective truth through language. That collective truth will only happen through heart communication with our mouths fucking shut,
Reminds me that I used to trip right before I would trip. I'd listen to this Alan Watts breathing meditation thing, and he's like, and it's this. He hits a gong. He's like, and we won't give it a name. It's like, it's happening. It's happening now. And then we, like you're saying, we kind of fall into our cognition and drama and baggage. It's a trip. I mean, I guess I remember, but yeah, part of me is working obviously through all this. This podcast started off but just as me talking with Raphael as like almost a psychotherapeutic couch. It turned into like bringing cool people on and then like figuring shit out. But there's nothing to figure out. It's more just like a taxonomical kind of foray into like, who art thou, do you think now, for the moment, and the fractal will keep bleeding in a second. So yeah, but if we were to just sit still, there wouldn't be a podcast, I guess. Or something. There would be no dance moves, right?
I'd say thank you for sticking out with us so long. I'd give the word to the both of you once again if there's anything else you'd like to mention. But I think, we've done well. The other things can only be communicated by frequency, scalar waves, probably immediate transmission across the ether. Yeah, so anything else, maybe Frank first and then Toni, that you'd like to say?
In the end, integrity is if you see children how they work with attention, it's like they when they see something, they look at it and they're totally absorbed with it and they gravitate towards the thing. They look at it. The moment they see something else, they just drop the other thing and they're absorbed by that one. And that's some sort of a movement from interest to interest. And Toni, I know what, and this is actually also goes for you, Jim, and for Raphael and all of us, that we are driven by curiosity. And as long as curiosity we can sustain the curiosity, we have momentum, we have drive, we have hunger, and we have lust to live. And yeah, what was actually my point? Did I have even a point? I don't know. But curiosity is yeah, okay. So if a system gets cloaked, congested, it starts to become boring. If I can see something, if I can recognize a pattern twice, it's already boring. So yeah, in the short term, we might run into many problems, but on the long term, it is beneficial to stay true to yourself, stay to your integrity, and move on. Yeah, that's my word. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Toni.
Yeah, I like that. I like that curiosity and lust for life. And I also think it's funny about the patterns, what you said, you know, once you recognize the pattern, it gets boring. But then it's always fun to create a pattern and then shake it up. Right? And I think that that's what we are here to do, is surprise each other. So I agree. I like curiosity, I like surprise, and I like a lust for life.
Great, Jim. And now you're muted. I don't know how that happened. You have the
When he was
final
saying,
word.
"What's the point?" Right, and it reminded me of Bill Hicks, another comedian, right, where he's like, "What's the
Yeah.
point? What's the point of this? It's just a fucking ride. It's a Mandelbrot tour, and we've just got to kind of work it out. The movement we need on our shoulders, right? We need to perspective shift constantly. And I think Toni, Frank, Raphael, you guys are catalysts of change, agents of change." And we're desperately needed right now because people are bored and they're starting to itch at their collars and snap at the people in the car next to them or whatever. So I think the more novel and the more interesting people can find options out there that are less, I don't know, condemnatory or, you know, hardcore or whatever. I don't even know the right word. Let's interjecting fun. Anyway, Toni, I really do appreciate you coming on. I don't know how many
Thank
podcasts you've
you.
done, but you are the exact guest I needed to kind of get the lubrication in the wheels again going. So much love to you. Tell your
I love
family
to
and
be
friends.
lube. I love to be emotional lube. And I do also want to give a big shout out to Melissa, who's been chatting away over
Yeah,
there. And I
she
love
must be a
Melissa's
Gemini.
energy. I know. I hope
No,
you
but
come and find me, Melissa, and we'll be friends till the end.
that's how it works. All right, guys. Yeah, the royal we. We're all out here. We're doing it. So just enjoy the dance.
Everybody keep moving. Stay true to yourselves. Thanks so much.
Thank you.